Number 1, Aaron Hernandez. He had fame, wealth, and a Super Bowl future ahead of him, until the night everything unraveled and the world saw a side of him no one was supposed to see. Aaron Joseph Hernandez was once celebrated as one of the NFL's most promising tight ends, a rising star with a multi-million-dollar contract and a reputation for being unstoppable on the field. Born on November 6, 1989, in Bristol, Connecticut, he grew up in a family that valued athletic success. His father, Dennis Hernandez, pushed him and his older brother hard in sports, especially football. But behind the structure and discipline was a turbulent home life filled with pressure, anger, and confusion that shaped Aaron long before fame ever did. When his father died suddenly from complications during surgery in 2006, Aaron was only 16. Friends and teachers noticed a drastic shift in his personality after that loss. He became more unpredictable, withdrawn in some moments and reckless in others. Still, his athletic talent carried him forward. He excelled at the University of Florida, where he played under coach Urban Meyer and helped the team win a national championship in 2008. Though scouts praised his ability, concerns about his behavior and attitude appeared even before his professional career began. Reports surfaced about fights, substance use, and questionable associations, but none of it stopped him from entering the 2010 NFL Draft. The New England Patriots selected him in the 4th round, and to many, it looked like a brilliant move. Despite being only 20 years old, he adapted quickly to the league and formed a dynamic offensive duo with fellow tight end Rob Gronkowski. By 2012, he had secured a 5-year contract extension worth $40 million. Off the field, he lived in a luxurious home with his fiancée, Shayana Jenkins, and their daughter. To the public, he had stability, success, and a future most athletes could only dream of. But out of the spotlight, he maintained ties with people from his past, individuals with reputations that clashed with his football image. His need for control, unpredictable temper, and constant suspicion of betrayal followed him into adulthood. In June of 2013, that hidden world caught up with him. On the morning of June 17th, a jogger discovered the body of 27-year-old Odin Lloyd in an industrial area of North Attleboro, Massachusetts. Lloyd was a semi-professional football player and was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée, meaning the two men were connected through family. Investigators quickly traced evidence back to Hernandez. Surveillance footage from his home showed him the night before Lloyd was found, holding what appeared to be a firearm. Car rental records matched the vehicle seen near the crime scene. Shell casings at the site matched ammunition found in his house. The timeline placed him with Lloyd only hours before the shooting. As police closed in, the media frenzy grew. In just days, he went from NFL star to prime suspect. On June 26th, police arrested him at his home, and the New England Patriots released him within hours. The charges shocked fans and analysts, but prosecutors stated they had enough evidence to move forward with a murder case. Investigators believe the incident stemmed from Hernandez growing paranoid that Lloyd had discussed things he wanted kept private. What might have started as tension among acquaintances escalated into something irreversible. As the trial began in January 2015, the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence, digital data, witness statements, and surveillance footage. Although the murder weapon was never recovered, the pattern of events laid out by investigators painted a grim picture. The defense countered by arguing that there was no direct proof of Hernandez pulling the trigger and that others could have been involved. Still, the prosecution argued he orchestrated and carried out the crime. On April 15, 2015, after deliberation, the jury found Hernandez guilty of first-degree murder, along with firearm charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision ended his football career permanently and marked the end of the life he had once built. Even after this conviction, other allegations trailed him. He faced additional charges tied to a 2012 double killing in Boston involving two men who were shot after an encounter at a nightclub. Although he was acquitted of those charges in 2017, the details of that case deepened the sense that his life had been split between athletic greatness and violent impulses. While serving his sentence at the Souza Correctional Center in Massachusetts, he filed an appeal on the Lloyd conviction and seemed to settle into the reality of prison life. Despite sharing occasional calls with family, reports described him as isolated, reserved, and sometimes reflective but guarded. Then, in April 2017, came the final twist no one expected. Just days after being acquitted in the double homicide trial, correctional officers found him unresponsive in his cell. He had hanged himself with bedsheets secured to the window frame. Attempts to revive him failed, and at age 27, he was pronounced dead at UMass Memorial Hospital. News of his death sparked confusion, grief, and heated speculation. Legally, some believed his conviction might be vacated under an old Massachusetts principle that erased convictions if a defendant died before their appeal was resolved. For a brief period, that ruling did void his conviction, but in 2019, the state's highest court overturned that doctrine, reinstating the murder conviction. In the aftermath, studies of his brain revealed severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a condition linked to repeated head trauma. Experts said the damage was unusually advanced for someone his age. To some, that raised questions about how much brain injury may have influenced his judgment, personality changes, and ability to control impulses. Others argued that no neurological disorder could explain his pattern of decisions or erase the responsibility he bore for Odin Lloyd's death. Families connected to him, as well as former teammates and coaches, were left to reconcile two different identities, one as a gifted athlete and teammate, the other as a man capable of irreversible harm. Today, his story stands as one of the most jarring examples of a public figure's fall from grace. He had the platform, the fame, and the resources to create a lasting legacy in sports. Yet his actions off the field redefined how the world remembers him. Those who once cheered his touchdowns now recall his conviction and the life that was taken. The questions left behind still linger. How does someone with so many opportunities end up consumed by violence? And how many warning signs go unnoticed when talent overshadows everything else? In the end, the final chapter of his life left no comeback, only reminders of what was lost, not just for him, but for the people who crossed his path. Number 2, Oscar Pistorius. He was once called the Blade Runner, a global symbol of human determination, a double amputee sprinter who broke barriers and ran alongside the world's fastest athletes. For years, Oscar Pistorius was seen as a rare story of hope, a man born without fibulas who had both legs amputated below the knee before his first birthday, yet refused to live within limits. Growing up in South Africa, he was raised in a privileged but emotionally complex home, shaped by a driven mother who pushed him to be independent and fearless. By his teens, he was competing in rugby and water polo before shifting to track and field after a knee injury. In 2004, he burst onto the Paralympic stage at the Athens Games and dominated the 100, 200, and 400 meters. What followed was a climb to international fame. He went to Beijing in 2008, shattered records, and became a household name among Paralympians. Then came the 2012 London Olympics, where he earned the historic title of being the first double amputee runner to compete against able-bodied athletes on the Olympic track. Sponsors, documentaries, and magazine features made him one of the most recognizable athletes in the world. Fans and kids around the globe believed his legacy would be one of inspiration. But behind the medals, there were signs of volatility, a love of firearms, quick temper, paranoia about security, and a lifestyle fueled by fame and adrenaline that often went unchecked. Everything changed on Valentine's Day in 2013. In the early hours of February 14th, residents of the gated Silver Woods estate in Pretoria heard shouting, crying, and finally gunshots coming from Pistorius's upscale home. Inside that bathroom, his girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, a 29-year-old model and law graduate, was behind the closed toilet door when he fired 4 shots through it using a 9mm handgun. She was struck multiple times and died shortly after. Pistorius called emergency services and claimed it was a tragic mistake, insisting he believed an intruder had broken into his home and that he fired out of fear for his life. But investigators and prosecutors saw something very different. The positioning of her injuries, the lack of signs of forced entry, reports of arguing before the gunfire, and Pistorius's past with reckless firearm use all raised suspicions that this was not a misjudgment, but an intentional act. Within hours, police arrested Pistorius, and the story dominated global media. The trial that followed in 2014 was one of the most watched legal proceedings in modern sports history. Prosecutors argued that he and Riva had been arguing and that he intentionally fired through the locked door, knowing she was inside. The defense maintained his story, that he felt vulnerable due to his disability, believed she was in bed, and thought an intruder was hiding in the bathroom. During the trial, recordings of past gun incidents were revisited. Witnesses described his temper. Forensic experts broke down trajectories, angles, and distances. The emotional weight grew heavier when texts between him and Riva were read aloud, hinting at conflict and fear in their relationship. Still, the question at the heart of everything remained. Was it a deliberate killing or a panicked overreaction? In September 2014, Judge Thokozile Masipa delivered her verdict. Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide, which is comparable to manslaughter rather than premeditated killing. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with eligibility for early release after serving part of it. For many, that ruling felt shockingly lenient given the nature of the act, and public reaction was intense. Riva Steenkamp's family expressed pain over what they saw as lack of full accountability. The prosecution quickly appealed the verdict, arguing that the legal interpretation was incorrect and that the evidence supported a conviction closer to intentional killing. The legal battle continued, and in December 2015, the South African Supreme Court of Appeal overturned the initial culpable homicide finding and replaced it with a conviction for murder. Their reasoning was that a reasonable person in Pistorius's position would have foreseen death as a likely result of firing 4 shots through a closed door, regardless of who was behind it. His sentence was then revisited. In 2016, he received 6 years for murder, a decision once again met with criticism for being too short. Prosecutors appealed again, insisting it did not meet the standard for such a conviction. Finally, in 2017, the sentence was increased to 15 years, with time already served taken into account. From his fall in 2013 to that final ruling, his career was dismantled piece by piece. Sponsors distanced themselves. His home was sold to pay legal fees. His athletic achievements were overshadowed by courtroom drama and international scrutiny. The once celebrated symbol of resilience became a convicted man whose name evoked tragedy instead of triumph. In prison, reports described him as quiet and compliant. He reportedly attended Bible study meetings, worked through therapy programs, and read letters from supporters alongside criticism from the public. His physical condition changed, and the confidence he displayed in stadiums was replaced with a subdued, introspective demeanor. The media, sports world, and global audience all grappled with the duality of his life. Was this the result of a lifetime of pressure, fear, and unresolved trauma, or was it a reflection of entitlement, control, and unwillingness to accept consequences? Supporters argued that his disability shaped the way he perceived threats. Critics pointed to his history with firearms, a pattern of aggression, and a need to dominate the narrative. Riva's death remained the center of it all. Her life, her family's grief, and the impact of a single act that could never be undone. Today, Oscar Pistorius remains incarcerated in South Africa, serving the sentence handed down after years of legal battles. His legacy is no longer defined by medals or records, but by the events of that night and everything that followed. The home where it happened has changed owners. His trophies collect dust in storage. The story that once inspired millions is now studied as a cautionary tale about power, ego, and the shadowed parts of a person's life that fame cannot hide. When people hear his name now, they don't think about his speed or his prosthetic blades or that moment at the London Games when he stood as a symbol of human potential. They think about a closed bathroom door, a terrified woman inside it, and the 4 gunshots that ended both her life and his future in a single moment. Number 3, Robinho. He was once celebrated as one of Brazil's brightest football talents, a player expected to follow in the footsteps of icons like Pelé and Ronaldo. Robson de Souza, known worldwide as Robinho, grew up in São Vicente, São Paulo, and was scouted at just 15 by the legendary Pelé himself. By the time he was a teenager, he was playing for Santos FC and dazzling crowds. With his footwork and flair, his talent took him to Europe, where he signed with Real Madrid in 2005 for a deal worth over $30 million. He later played for Manchester City and AC Milan, becoming a global star with a massive fan base. From World Cup appearances to high-profile sponsorships, Robinho had wealth, fame, and influence. His image was polished, energetic, and charismatic. But off the field, a different version of him would eventually come to light, one that shattered his reputation and left a permanent stain on his name. The crime that changed everything took place in Milan, Italy, in 2013, while he was playing for AC Milan. According to court documents, a 22-year-old Albanian woman reported that she was harmed at a nightclub while heavily intoxicated. Prosecutors determined that Robinho and a group of friends were involved, taking advantage of her in a private area of the club. The victim had no memory of parts of the night, and investigators relied on surveillance footage, testimony, and intercepted phone messages among the men. What made the case especially disturbing was how casually the group discussed the incident in private conversations that were later used as evidence. Robinho left Italy not long after, continuing his football career abroad, but the legal process in Milan moved forward without him. In 2017, an Italian court convicted Robinho and one of his co-defendants in absentia, sentencing both to 9 years in prison. The ruling stated clearly that the woman was in no condition to consent and that the act was deliberate. Robinho and his legal team denied the accusations, claiming the encounter was consensual. However, the court rejected that argument after reviewing the intercepted conversations and the victim's condition. Italian prosecutors presented messages in which Robinho described the woman in a degrading manner and dismissed the seriousness of the situation. The case continued through appeals, with Robinho's defense attempting to overturn or reduce the sentence. In 2020, he attempted a short-lived return to Santos FC, the club where his career began. Fans and sponsors responded with outrage. Public backlash was immediate and intense, leading Santos to cancel his contract just days after the announcement. The conversation around the incident dominated Brazilian media and sparked widespread condemnation. Activists, former players, and public figures questioned why any club would align itself with him while he was under a serious conviction. Then came the final blow to his legal position. In January 2022, Italy's Supreme Court upheld the 9-year sentence, making it final with no further appeals available. Under international law, Italy formally requested that Brazil extradite Robinho to serve his time. However, the Brazilian constitution does not permit the extradition of its citizens. As a result, Italy asked Brazil's justice system to enforce the sentence domestically. That process is still underway, but the legal judgment itself is complete. Robinho is officially convicted and sentenced. Since the ruling, Robinho's public appearances have nearly vanished. Sponsors cut ties, clubs refused to sign him, and his name was scrubbed from many football circles. Once hailed as a prodigy, he became an example of how fame cannot erase accountability. The victim, whose identity remains protected, pursued the case with persistence, and Italian authorities carried it through over nearly a decade. Robinho's legal team continues to argue about jurisdiction and enforcement, but the conviction stands as legally binding. In Brazil, public opinion has shifted sharply. For years, some fans were divided, but the final court decision left little room for doubt. His former teammates keep their distance, and sports networks rarely mention him except in connection to the case. Even his early achievements at Real Madrid, Manchester City, and Il Milan are overshadowed by his legal history. His legacy, once tied to swift goals and dazzling tricks, is now remembered for a courtroom outcome rather than anything he did on the pitch. As of now, Robinho lives in Brazil, but the risk of serving his sentence remains. If the Brazilian courts choose to enforce the Italian ruling, he could be required to begin serving time in his home country. If they decide not to, he may never leave Brazil again, because any travel outside could result in arrest and extradition. The life he once lived, marked by fame, money, and adoration, has been replaced by isolation and legal uncertainty. In football history, he will not be remembered for the talent he showed in Madrid or the promise he once held. Instead, he will be associated with the crime for which he was convicted, the sentence that awaits him, and the irreversible damage to his name caused by his own actions. Number 4. Adam Johnson. He was once a Premier League star with a promising future, a gifted winger whose speed and technical skill made him a fan favorite. Adam Johnson was born on July 14, 1987, in Sunderland, England, and began his football journey at a young age. He rose through the ranks at Middlesbrough's youth academy and made his professional debut as a teenager. His performances attracted attention quickly, and after a successful spell at Middlesbrough, he transferred to Manchester City in 2010. Playing in the Premier League, he shared the pitch with some of the best players in the world and even earned a spot on the England national team. Fans saw him as a local success story, talented, respected, and admired. In 2012, he joined Sunderland AFC, where his profile grew even more. By all appearances, he was at the peak of his career, with fame, wealth, and a loyal fan base. But in early 2015, everything began to fall apart after allegations surfaced that would quickly turn his image from admired athlete to convicted offender. The case began when messages between Johnson and a 15-year-old girl came to light. The communications led to allegations that he had engaged in illegal contact with a minor, and in March 2015, he was arrested by Durham police. At first, he denied wrongdoing and continued to play football while on bail, even appearing in matches for Sunderland. The club suspended him, but later reinstated him after he pleaded not guilty. As the investigation deepened, police recovered messages and evidence that painted a stark and troubling picture. Public attention intensified, and sponsors began cutting ties. Fans who once cheered his goals were now faced with headlines detailing the accusations in detail. In early 2016, the legal proceedings moved forward. Johnson initially maintained his innocence and denied all charges. His legal team attempted to challenge parts of the case, but as trial approached, the weight of the evidence became clear. Right before the trial officially began at Bradford Crown Court, he changed his plea and admitted to 2 charges, 1 count of meeting a minor after grooming, and 1 count involving inappropriate physical contact. However, he continued to deny 2 other related offenses, leading the case to move forward on those points. The trial featured testimony from the victim, digital records, and analysis of his behavior and intent. During the proceedings, Johnson's own admissions confirmed that he knew the girl was underage at the time of the encounters. On March 2, 2016, the jury found him guilty of one of the remaining charges and acquitted him on the other. The judge emphasized the position of power Johnson held as a public figure and the seriousness of engaging in communication and behavior of that nature with a minor. On March 24, 2016, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The football world, including his former clubs and teammates, distanced themselves immediately. Sunderland released him, and his reputation collapsed overnight. Fans who once wore his jersey now voiced anger and disappointment. His family life also suffered. His partner ended their relationship, and he faced significant media scrutiny from every angle. While in prison, Johnson served his sentence at facilities including HM Prison Moorland in South Yorkshire. Reports from inside described him as reserved, rarely interacting with other inmates, and largely focused on keeping a low profile. He attempted to appeal the sentence in late 2016, arguing that the punishment was too harsh, but the Court of Appeal rejected the request. Public opinion remained overwhelmingly negative, with many pointing to his wealth and status as reasons he should be held fully accountable. In the eyes of the public and the court, his fame did not entitle him to softer consequences. After serving about half of his sentence, Johnson was released in March 2019 on license, which is similar to parole. His release came with restrictions, including ongoing monitoring and limitations on travel and employment. Once out, he stayed largely away from public life. Any possibility of returning to professional football disappeared. His name was removed from club histories, and broadcasters refused to feature clips of his past matches. Even casual discussions about his career came with reminders of his conviction. The long-term consequences extended beyond prison. His financial earnings dropped severely, sponsorships were gone, and many former supporters refused to accept any attempt at a public comeback. The legal case followed him into everyday life, with employment challenges and monitoring measures common for individuals with similar convictions. Any hope of repairing his reputation never materialized. In public discussions, his name sits alongside other athletes who fell from grace due to serious criminal behavior. Today, Adam Johnson lives a far different life than the one he had at the height of his football career. He no longer plays professionally and avoids public appearances. What once defined him, goals, transfers, and international caps, has been replaced permanently by his conviction. His story is a reminder of how quickly a career can implode when someone abuses their status and ignores the laws that apply to everyone, no matter how famous. The legacy he left behind is not of athletic achievement, but of a fall that was entirely his own doing, one that cannot be separated from his name no matter how much time has passed. Number 5. Michael Vick. He was once one of the most electrifying athletes in American sports, a quarterback known for impossible speed, highlight reel plays, and jaw-dropping agility. Michael Dwayne Vick was born on June 26, 1980, in Newport News, Virginia, an area where poverty, crime, and limited opportunity shaped the lives of many kids growing up. From a young age, he used football as his way forward. At Virginia Tech, he became a college sensation, leading his team to national prominence and finishing as a Heisman Trophy finalist. In 2001, he was drafted first overall by the Atlanta Falcons, the first black quarterback ever taken at the number 1 spot. His style of play changed how people thought the position could be played. He became a superstar with endorsement deals, a massive fan base, and a reputation as one of the most exciting dual-threat quarterbacks the NFL had ever seen. By the mid-2000s, Vick had cemented himself as the face of the Falcons. Kids wanted his jerseys, analysts praised his explosive plays, and he was one of the league's most marketable figures. But as his fame grew, so did the distance between his public image and the secret life he was living off the field. In April 2007, federal investigators raided a property he owned in Smithfield, Virginia. What they found exposed a world hidden from fans and teammates. Behind that home was a dogfighting operation known as Bad News Kennels, and Vick was not just loosely associated with it, he was a central figure. Investigators uncovered equipment, injured dogs, and evidence of gambling, breeding, and violent acts. The allegations were severe, and authorities believed he had funded, organized, and participated in the operation for several years. As evidence came out, public outrage exploded. At first, Vick denied involvement, and his attorneys argued he had little to do with what happened on the property. But the federal case against him gathered momentum fast, supported by co-defendants who began cooperating with prosecutors. In July 2007, a federal indictment charged him with conspiracy related to dogfighting and illegal gambling. His sponsors cut ties. The Atlanta Falcons suspended him. Fans who once admired him expressed shock and anger. As the legal pressure increased, Vick eventually accepted a plea deal rather than face trial. In August 2007, he pleaded guilty to federal charges related to the dog fighting operation. He admitted to funding the activities and acknowledged being present during violent acts carried out against dogs. In December of that year, he was sentenced to 23 months in federal prison. The fall from fame was immediate and total. Once a highest-paid quarterback, he lost millions in endorsements, salary, and bonuses. His name was removed from marketing campaigns, and his reputation collapsed almost overnight. His time in prison was spent between the Northern Neck Regional Jail and the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas. During that time, he filed for bankruptcy as legal fees, and lost income took their toll. When he was released in 2009, it was under strict federal supervision. Many believed his football career was permanently over. But the Philadelphia Eagles gave him a controversial opportunity to return to the NFL. Some fans protested. Others believed in second chances. Slowly, he worked his way back onto the field, first as a backup and then as a starter. In 2010, he delivered one of the best seasons of his career, earning Comeback Player of the Year honors and a spot in the Pro Bowl. Yet, while his performance helped reshape public discussion, his past never fully left the spotlight. Animal rights groups continued to protest his appearances. Interviews about his past followed him wherever he went. By the time he retired from football, after stints with the New York Jets and Pittsburgh Steelers, Vick had spent years working with advocacy groups and speaking about his role in the case. He partnered with organizations to discourage animal cruelty and address students about the consequences of decisions made in private. Some accepted his efforts as sincere growth. Others saw them as image repair. The legal facts of his conviction remained unchanged, and the memory of what was uncovered in 2007 never disappeared. Today, Michael Vick's legacy is divided. On the field, he changed the way the quarterback position is played and inspired a generation of athletes. Off the field, his name is permanently tied to one of the most disturbing scandals in modern sports history. Even years after serving his sentence, opinions about him remain sharply divided. Some view his journey as one of accountability and transformation. Others believe no level of remorse or rehabilitation can erase what happened at that property in Virginia. Regardless of how he is remembered by fans or critics, his story stands as one of the biggest rises and falls in professional sports, shaped by choices that cost him everything he once had and redefined his life forever. Number 6. Jarryd Hayne. He was once one of Australia's most celebrated athletes, a rugby league superstar with fame that stretched across continents. Jarryd Lee Hayne was born on February 15, 1988, in Sydney, into a family deeply connected to sports. His natural athleticism became obvious at an early age. By his late teens, he was already playing professionally for the Parramatta Eels in the National Rugby League, where he quickly became a standout player. His speed, footwork, and on-field instincts earned him awards, national representation, and a reputation as one of the best in the game. In 2009, he won the prestigious Dally M Medal as the NRL's Player of the Year. Media outlets praised his talent, and fans saw him as a national icon. Everything about his career suggested he was headed for legacy status. But over the years, his off-field behavior would begin to overshadow everything he achieved on the field. In 2014, he made a surprise decision that drew international attention. He left the NRL to chase a dream of playing in the NFL. In 2015, he signed with the San Francisco 49ers, becoming one of the few professional rugby players to make the jump. His preseason appearances created buzz, and he even played in regular season games as a punt returner and running back. While he didn't become a long-term NFL star, his story captured headlines around the world. After leaving the 49ers in 2016, he briefly pursued a spot in the Fiji national rugby sevens team for the Olympics before returning to the NRL with the Gold Coast Titans and later Parramatta. But while his athletic career was filled with high-profile moves, his private choices would catch up with him in a way fame couldn't protect. In 2018, a woman reported to police that Hayne had harmed her at a home in Newcastle, New South Wales. She said she had made it clear she did not want things to escalate, but the situation turned physical and left her with injuries. The incident happened on the night of the NRL Grand Final, and she later sought medical treatment. When questioned by authorities, Hayne initially denied wrongdoing. But evidence presented during the investigation, including messages and witness accounts, contradicted his version of events. By November 2018, he was charged with aggravated assault involving non-consensual contact. The legal process was long and complicated, involving multiple trials. His first trial in 2020 ended with a hung jury. But the second trial in March 2021 led to a conviction. The court found that he had acted without consent and caused injury in the process. The judge emphasized that his fame did not place him above the law. In May 2021, Hayne was sentenced to 5 years and 9 months in prison, with a non-parole period of 3 years and 8 months. His legal team appealed the verdict, arguing issues with how the case was presented. In early 2023, the conviction was overturned due to procedural concerns, triggering a third trial. In April 2023, the third trial concluded with a guilty verdict again. The court reaffirmed that the evidence and testimony supported the charges. In May 2023, he was sentenced once more to 4 years and 9 months behind bars, with the earliest possible release in 2025. His legal team has since made further appeals, but the conviction stands, and he is currently serving his sentence. The fallout was immediate and lasting. His former clubs distanced themselves. Sponsors disappeared. Broadcasting networks no longer featured him in commentary or promotional material. Fans who once idolized him expressed disappointment and anger. Support for him sharply declined across Australia, and his name became synonymous not with athletic achievement, but with criminal behavior and legal disgrace. The victim's testimony, the court's findings, and the repeated convictions ensured his downfall would not be seen as a misunderstanding or rumor. It was a legal fact. Today, Jarryd Hayne sits far from the stadium lights that once defined him. The man who became a national star, jumped to the NFL, represented his country, and inspired young players is now remembered for a conviction that ended his legacy. His story is a reminder that success in sports does not shield anyone from responsibility. The trophies, headlines, and applause that once followed him have been replaced by a record that cannot be erased. And for the people who once saw him as a hero, his legacy is no longer about what he did on the field, but about the harm caused by the choices he made away from it. Number 7. Bruno Fernandes de Souza. He was once a celebrated goalkeeper in Brazilian football, a rising star whose talent drew attention from major clubs and fans across the country. Bruno Fernandes de Souza, known simply as Bruno, was born on December 23, 1984, in Belo Horizonte. As a young athlete, he worked his way up through smaller clubs before joining Flamengo, one of Brazil's most popular teams. By 2009, he had become team captain, won national titles, and was even being considered for the Brazilian national team. He had money, status, and a career many players could only dream of. But while he was admired on the field, his personal life was far more complicated, involving relationships and disputes that would lead to one of the most shocking criminal cases in modern sports. In 2009, Bruno began a relationship with a model named Eliza Samudio. Their involvement quickly turned turbulent after she became pregnant and said Bruno was the father of the child. She demanded recognition and financial support, which he denied. The situation escalated when she filed reports claiming he had threatened her life. At one point, she told authorities she feared something would happen to her if he was not held accountable. But in October of that year, a judge dismissed her request for protection, and despite her warnings, nothing more came of it at the time. In June 2010, Eliza disappeared. Friends, family, and eventually the media started asking questions. Weeks went by without any sign of her. Investigators turned their attention to Bruno after learning she had traveled to meet people connected to him shortly before she vanished. Police discovered that she had been taken to a property in Minas Gerais owned by a friend of Bruno's. A young cousin of his later told authorities he had witnessed her being taken and never leaving. The story he described was disturbing, suggesting she was held, harmed, and disposed of in a way meant to eliminate any trace. As the investigation grew, Bruno was arrested along with several others, including a former police officer and associates believed to be involved. The most shocking detail emerged when the cousin testified that her remains were allegedly disposed of in a method that left nothing recoverable. Eliza was never found, and the case centered heavily on conspiracy, planning, and intent. Her baby, believed to be Bruno's son, was found alive and placed in the care of her family. In 2013, after a lengthy legal process, Bruno was convicted of orchestrating the kidnapping and killing of Eliza, as well as concealing the body. He was sentenced to 22 years and 3 months in prison. The court concluded he was responsible for planning the crime and attempting to silence her permanently. The details of the case stunned Brazil and made international headlines. Fans who once cheered for him struggled to reconcile the athlete they admired with the evidence presented in court. While serving his sentence, Bruno gained occasional media attention. In 2017, he was briefly released on a legal technicality while awaiting an appeal. During that time, a lower division club in Brazil attempted to sign him, sparking massive backlash. Protests erupted, and sponsors threatened to withdraw support. Under intense public pressure, the club withdrew the offer. A short time later, his release was overturned, and he was ordered back to prison to continue his sentence. Over the years, legal motions and appeals adjusted aspects of his confinement, but the conviction remained. He has never denied knowing Eliza, but has disputed certain details of the case, even as the courts have maintained their findings. His son with her is now being raised by maternal relatives, far removed from the public life his parents once occupied. Today, Bruno's legacy is not defined by championships or athletic achievements, but by one of the most disturbing crimes ever connected to a professional athlete. Once seen as a role model and captain of one of Brazil's biggest clubs, he is now remembered for a conviction that ended his career and destroyed families. His name, once spoken with pride by fans, now carries a permanent association with violence, betrayal, and the consequences of actions that cannot be undone. The life he could have had is gone, replaced by years behind bars, and a reputation that will follow him long after his sentence is complete. Number 8. Ray Rice. He was once one of the most dependable running backs in the NFL, a Pro Bowl talent with a Super Bowl ring, and a reputation for leadership on and off the field. Raymel Maurice Rice was born on January 22, 1987, in New Rochelle, New York. His childhood came with hardship. His father was killed in a drive-by shooting when Ray was just 1 year old, and his cousin, who became a father figure to him, died in a car crash when he was 10. Football became his way out, a focus that carried him through adversity. At Rutgers University, he became one of the school's most celebrated athletes. His performances drew national attention, and in 2008, he was drafted by the Baltimore Ravens in the second round. In the years that followed, he emerged as a star. By 2012, he helped lead the team to a Super Bowl victory, earning both respect from teammates and admiration from fans across the league. Sponsors promoted him, coaches praised his discipline, and many believed he would retire as one of the franchise's greats. Everything pointed to a long-respected career, until one moment changed it all and ended everything he had built. In February 2014, Rice and his then-fiancée, Janae Palmer, visited the Revel Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Security cameras captured the two entering an elevator together. What happened inside shocked the world when it eventually surfaced. An incident occurred that left Palmer unconscious on the floor, and another camera recorded Rice dragging her, unresponsive, out of the elevator. When the footage first leaked, it showed only the aftermath and not the full action inside the elevator. Even with limited footage, police arrested both Rice and Palmer and charged them with simple assault. At the time, the NFL issued Rice a 2-game suspension, a decision that critics immediately called too lenient. But what no one outside of investigators had yet seen was the full, unedited footage from inside the elevator. When that video was released by the media in September 2014, the public saw Rice strike Palmer with enough force to render her unconscious. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Fans, commentators, former players, and advocacy organizations condemned the incident. The Baltimore Ravens quickly terminated his contract, and the NFL changed his suspension to an indefinite ban. Within days, Rice went from beloved athlete to one of the most controversial figures in all of professional sports. The legal system handled the case separately. Rice avoided trial by entering a pretrial intervention program in May 2014, which allowed first-time offenders to avoid a formal conviction if they met certain conditions. Because of that, he did not serve jail time. He married Palmer soon after the incident, and she publicly supported him despite the backlash. Still, his career was effectively over. Sponsors like Nike and major brands cut ties. Jerseys with his name were returned in record numbers during NFL-organized buyback events. For many, video proof of what happened inside that elevator left no room for forgiveness. The controversy also forced the NFL to confront its policies on player misconduct, especially involving domestic violence. Commissioner Roger Goodell faced intense criticism over how the case was initially handled. Public pressure led to the implementation of stricter disciplinary standards for off-field behavior. In many ways, Rice's case became a turning point for how professional sports dealt with violence in private life. His name entered public discussion not as an athlete, but as a symbol of how institutions had previously failed to respond to serious off-field conduct. Rice appealed his indefinite suspension, arguing that he had been punished twice for the same incident, once with a 2-game ban and again with an open-ended suspension after the video became public. In November 2014, a judge ruled in his favor, stating that the NFL had overreached with the second punishment. He was reinstated, at least on paper, and became eligible to sign with any team. But no team called. Coaches and owners avoided the topic when asked. Analysts debated whether he deserved another chance, but teams chose younger players and avoided the publicity that came with signing him. In the years that followed, Rice publicly apologized multiple times. He began speaking at schools, community centers, and events about accountability and consequences. He said he did not blame anyone but himself for the end of his career. Some people viewed his efforts as genuine. Others believed the damage was permanent and beyond repair. Even though he and Palmer remained together and tried to move forward privately, the incident became inseparable from his legacy. He expressed interest in returning to the NFL as late as 2016, offering to donate all his potential salary to domestic violence programs, but the league and its teams remained silent. As time passed, Rice focused on family life and stayed involved in youth football programs. He spoke in interviews about mental health, responsibility, and the effects of a single irreversible decision. But whenever his name reappeared in headlines, it was tied not to touchdowns or championships, but to the video that ended his career. The football achievements that once defined him, over 6,000 rushing yards, Pro Bowl selections, a championship season, faded behind the memory of that elevator and its consequences. Today, Ray Rice lives far outside the spotlight he once occupied. His NFL career, once destined for longevity and prestige, ended abruptly in disgrace. The league moved on without him, and even though he was never imprisoned, the social and professional fallout served as a different kind of sentence. Fans who once admired his talent remember what happened more than anything he did on the field. His name remains part of conversations about how high-profile athletes face consequences when their private actions come to light. In the end, his story reflects a dramatic fall, not driven by physical decline or injury, but by a moment the entire world witnessed and could not forget. The man who once held a Super Bowl trophy left football not through retirement or trade, but through a scandal that reshaped policies and public expectations. Long after his final game, his legacy is tied to the question of accountability. How one decision can erase years of triumph, alter the course of a life, and close doors that never reopen. Number 9. Henry Ruggs III. He was only 22 years old, a first-round NFL draft pick with a multi-million-dollar contract and a future that seemed guaranteed. Henry James Ruggs III was born on January 24, 1999, in Montgomery, Alabama. Growing up, he excelled in football and track, earning attention for his rare speed and athletic control. At the University of Alabama, he became a standout receiver under coach Nick Saban, winning a national championship and forming part of one of the most feared receiving squads in college football. His blazing pace made him a projected star at the next level. In 2020, the Las Vegas Raiders selected him 12th overall in the NFL draft, making him the first wide receiver taken that year. With a 4-year contract worth over $16 million and endorsements lined up, he was positioned to become a face of the franchise. Fans believed he could help carry the team into a new era in their new city. But his rising career would take a devastating turn one night in Las Vegas, one that ended a life, destroyed his own future, and left a permanent scar on the league. In the early morning hours of November 2nd, 2021, Ruggs had spent time at a Topgolf location and later went to a nightclub with his girlfriend, Kiara Rudy Washington. According to investigators, he had been drinking before leaving in his Chevrolet Corvette. At approximately 3:40 a.m., he was driving through a residential area at speeds recorded at over 150 miles per hour. Just seconds before impact, the vehicle slowed slightly, but was still traveling around 127 miles per hour when it crashed into the back of a Toyota RAV4. Inside that SUV was a 23-year-old woman named Tina Tintor and her dog. The collision ignited the vehicle almost instantly. Witnesses reported hearing screams, but the flames spread too quickly. Tintor and her dog were unable to escape and died at the scene. First responders arrived minutes later, but the damage was irreversible. Ruggs and his girlfriend sustained injuries, but both survived. Police and firefighters found the Corvette heavily damaged and off the side of the road. At the hospital, Ruggs refused a field sobriety test, but a blood sample taken later revealed his blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. The details of the crash stunned the public and shook the NFL. The Las Vegas Raiders responded within hours. On the same day of the crash, they released him from the team. The news broke across every sports network, and reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage. For many, it was the clearest example of how a single reckless choice could erase everything in an instant. Prosecutors in Clark County charged Ruggs with driving under the influence, resulting in death and reckless driving. The case moved quickly, with investigators presenting crash data retrieved from his vehicle's onboard system. The numbers, 156 miles per hour, no braking until just before impact, and a high blood alcohol level, formed the core of the prosecution's argument. His legal team entered negotiations while public anger continued to build. When he appeared in court, he walked with assistance due to injuries from the crash. The courtroom included family members of Tina Tintor, who showed quiet grief as the proceedings continued. In 2023, Ruggs agreed to a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of DUI resulting in death and 1 count of vehicular manslaughter. The agreement avoided a trial, which could have resulted in decades behind bars. In August 2023, he was sentenced to a prison term of 3 to 10 years. The judge acknowledged the severity of the crash, the loss of life, and the role intoxication played in the outcome. Ruggs apologized in court, expressing remorse to the victim's family, but no words could change what had happened. For the Tintor family, the sentencing marked the end of one chapter of their grief, but could not bring closure to a life taken so suddenly and violently. Inside prison, Ruggs has maintained a low profile. Reports from correctional officials describe his behavior as compliant, with no major incidents since entering the system. He will become eligible for parole after serving the minimum portion of his sentence, but even in the best-case scenario, the career he once had is finished. The NFL has not commented on any hypothetical return, and no team has expressed interest. His name, once connected to speed on the field, is now tied to the speed that killed an innocent person. The legacy he built in college and early in his pro career has been replaced by the consequences of his actions that night in Las Vegas. The crash prompted renewed discussions across the league about alcohol use, decision-making, and the responsibilities athletes carry when they step off the field. Former players and coaches spoke publicly about the heartbreak of the case, not only for Ruggs' wasted future, but more importantly, for the life that was taken. Programs designed to assist players with transportation and off-field support were highlighted, raising painful questions about why help wasn't used when it mattered most. Today, Henry Ruggs III is a cautionary tale told in locker rooms, college programs, and news stories. He entered the NFL with expectations of greatness, but became known for a tragedy that could have been prevented with a single different choice. The family of Tina Tintor continues to grieve, and her name has been honored in memorials and community gatherings in Las Vegas. For Ruggs, no amount of time behind bars can undo what happened, and no future opportunity can erase the reality of that night. His story is no longer about potential, athleticism, or fame. It is about accountability, irreversible loss, and the truth that one moment of recklessness can permanently define a life. Number 10. Chad Wheeler. He wasn't a superstar, but he had carved out a respected place for himself in professional football. Chad Wheeler was born on January 19, 1994, in Santa Monica, California. From a young age, he was known for his size and athletic ability, which naturally steered him toward football. He played at the University of Southern California, where he became a starting offensive tackle and earned All-Pac 12 honors. Despite some off-field issues in college, including an incident linked to mental health struggles, he was still considered talented enough to be signed by the NFL. In 2017, the New York Giants brought him on as an undrafted free agent. He later joined the Seattle Seahawks, working as a backup lineman. Though not widely famous, he had what many athletes fight for: a position in the league, a solid salary, and the chance to keep building his career. But all of that ended when one night put an irreversible mark on his name and made headlines that shocked even those used to controversy in sports. On the night of January 22, 2021, Wheeler was in his apartment in Kent, Washington, with his girlfriend at the time. What followed was a violent incident that drew national attention once the details were made public. According to police reports and court documents, an argument escalated into a physical attack in which the woman was left seriously injured. She later told officers that he had grabbed her by the neck and struck her multiple times, leaving visible wounds. At one point, she lost consciousness, and when she regained awareness, Wheeler allegedly expressed surprise that she was still alive. She managed to call 911 while hiding in a bathroom. When officers arrived, they heard screams and forced entry into the apartment. They found her bruised and bleeding, and Wheeler was detained at the scene. He was arrested and charged with first-degree domestic violence assault, unlawful imprisonment, and resisting arrest. The incident made immediate headlines across the nation. Within hours, the Seattle Seahawks released a statement saying they were aware of the situation, and shortly after, Wheeler was removed from the team. The NFL distanced itself quickly, and public reaction was intense. Commentators and former players expressed outrage over the severity of the assault. Photos from the police report showing the woman's injuries circulated widely across media platforms. The victim later confirmed that she believed she could have died if she hadn't managed to escape and call for help. In court, Wheeler did not deny that the incident took place. His attorneys stated that he had been experiencing a severe mental health episode and was not in control of his actions. They pointed to his history of bipolar disorder, which had been previously reported during his college years. While the court acknowledged his diagnosis, prosecutors emphasized the seriousness of the violence and the level of danger the victim faced. They argued that regardless of mental health influences, Wheeler posed a threat and needed to be held accountable. Legal proceedings continued through 2021 and into 2022. During that time, Wheeler remained out of the league, unemployed, and living under court-imposed conditions, including GPS monitoring and restrictions on contact with the victim. In December 2023, after a lengthy process and multiple hearings, a jury found him guilty of first-degree assault and second-degree assault, both categorized as domestic violence. The charges reflected both the physical harm caused and the intent demonstrated during the incident. In 2024, he was sentenced to 81 months in prison, just under 7 years. The judge made it clear that the violence was severe, and the victim's testimony played a central role in outlining the danger she faced during the attack. After sentencing, Wheeler was taken into custody to begin serving his term. With the conviction final, any prospect of returning to professional sports disappeared permanently. No team expressed interest in him before the verdict, and after sentencing, the possibility became non-existent. His NFL career, which had been built on years of training and opportunity, ended overnight. He went from a player fighting for a roster spot to an inmate in the Washington state prison system. The victim has since focused on recovery and advocacy, supported publicly by those who believe her case highlighted gaps in how domestic violence by athletes is addressed. The NFL did not suspend him. They simply separated from him entirely once the arrest became public. Today, Wheeler's name surfaces only in connection with what happened in that apartment. His brief football career, once a point of pride for his family and supporters, is overshadowed entirely by the court case and the violence described in testimony. While some point to mental health as a factor, the conviction and the length of his sentence confirm how the legal system viewed the severity of his actions. There is no talk of reinstatement, no path back into the league, and no endorsement of any kind. His legacy is not built on athletic performance, but on a case that ended any possibility of redemption in the public eye. For many who followed his career, the shock wasn't because he was a superstar. It was because his actions were so extreme that they stood out even in a field where off-field behavior is scrutinized constantly. His story has become one of wasted opportunity, irreversible harm, and a fall defined by violence rather than athletic failure. And unlike those who retired voluntarily or aged out of the sport, his exit from the NFL was absolute, final, and branded by a conviction that will follow him long after his sentence is served.